Marcus Johnson stood in line at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, his boarding pass clutched firmly in hand. At 17, he was traveling alone to Washington, D.C. to visit his mother for the weekend. The first-class ticket had cost him 3 months of savings from his weekend job at the local bookstore, but seeing his mom was worth every penny. They hadn't spent time together in person for nearly 2 months due to her demanding new position. The line moved forward, and Marcus adjusted, the strap of his backpack on his shoulder. Inside was his laptop, a dog-eared book about federal law enforcement careers, and a small gift for his mother, a framed photo of the two of them from his academic awards ceremony last spring. He had been named top student in his AP government class, and the pride in his mother's eyes that day still made him smile. "Next passenger," called the gate agent, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes but a friendly smile. Marcus stepped forward and handed over his boarding pass and ID. The woman glanced between his face and his driver's license, then back at her computer. "First, time flying first class?" she asked, noticing his age and the premium seat assignment. "No, ma'am," Marcus answered politely, "but first time flying to D.C. by myself." The gate agent nodded approvingly. "Well, you're all set, Mr. Johnson. Enjoy your flight and your visit." Marcus thanked her and walked down the jetway, feeling a flutter of excitement. His mother had moved to Washington for her new job 4 months ago, and while they video chatted almost daily, it wasn't the same as being together. He'd been staying with his aunt in Chicago to finish his junior year without disruption. When he entered the plane, a flight attendant with blonde hair pulled into a tight bun stood at the entrance. Her name tag read, "Heather Mills." She greeted the businessman ahead of Marcus with a warm smile, directing him to his seat with a graceful gesture. When it was Marcus's turn, her smile stiffened slightly. "Boarding pass?" she asked, though she hadn't asked the previous passenger. Marcus handed it over. Heather studied it longer than seemed necessary before returning it. "That's 3A, window seat on the left," she said, her tone noticeably cooler. "Thank you," Marcus replied, maintaining his composure as he made his way to his seat. First class was half empty, with most passengers still boarding. Marcus found his seat and stored his backpack under the seat in front of him, keeping his book out, to read during the flight. As he settled in, he noticed a white woman in her 50s taking the aisle seat across from him. She gave him a quick once-over, her eyebrows rising slightly before she turned away to speak to her husband. Marcus pretended not to notice. He was used to these looks, the subtle surprise when people saw a young black man in spaces they didn't expect to see him. His mother had prepared him for this reality from an early age, teaching him to hold his head high and remember that he belonged anywhere his achievements took him. More passengers boarded, filling the cabin with the sounds of shuffling feet and overhead compartments being closed. Marcus's seat neighbor had not yet arrived, giving him a moment of peaceful solitude. He was thirsty after rushing through the terminal to make his flight on time. When Heather passed by, Marcus raised his hand slightly. "Excuse me, could I please have some water?" Heather paused, looking down at him. "We don't begin beverage service until after takeoff," she said curtly. "Of course I understand," Marcus replied. Just then, an older white gentleman in the row ahead asked Heather for a pre-flight coffee. Without hesitation, she smiled warmly. "Coming right up, sir." Marcus noticed the inconsistency, but remained silent, opening his book instead. A minute later, a middle-aged white businessman took the seat next to Marcus, giving him a brief nod before putting on headphones. The boarding process continued. Marcus observed Heather moving through the cabin, helping passengers with their luggage and answering questions with a pleasant demeanor. When she returned to his row, she stopped and stared at his seatbelt. "Please make sure your seatbelt is fastened properly," she instructed, though it already was. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus responded, despite the belt being securely fastened across his lap. 5 minutes later, she returned. "May I see your boarding pass again?" Marcus pulled it from his pocket and handed it to her, keeping his expression neutral despite his growing discomfort. Heather examined it with unusual scrutiny. "You're sure you're in the right seat?" "Yes, 3A. It's right here on the pass," Marcus pointed out calmly. She handed it back without a word and moved on. The businessman beside Marcus gave him a curious glance but said nothing. As the flight prepared for takeoff, Marcus noticed Heather watching him from the galley. She had not asked any other passengers to verify their seating assignments twice or checked their already fastened seatbelts. He tried to focus on his book, a biography of the first black FBI director that his mother had recommended, but found his concentration broken by the sense of being watched. The plane took off smoothly, climbing into the clear blue sky above Chicago. Marcus gazed out the window, watching his city shrink beneath him. In just 2 hours, he would be with his mother. The thought brought a smile to his face despite the uncomfortable start to his journey. Once they reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign dinged off. Heather began preparing the beverage cart. When she reached Marcus's row, she served the businessman next to him first. "And for you?" she asked Marcus, her tone noticeably less warm. "Water, please," Marcus said. She handed him a plastic cup with water, being careful to avoid touching his fingers. Marcus thanked her and returned to his book. Halfway through the flight, Marcus reached down to his backpack to get his headphones. As his hand moved toward his bag, Heather, who had been walking by, stopped abruptly. "What are you doing?" she demanded, loud enough that several nearby passengers looked up. Marcus straightened, surprised by her sharp tone. "Just getting my headphones from my bag," he explained. "I need to see what you're reaching for," Heather insisted, her voice still raised. Passengers were now openly staring. Marcus felt heat rise to his face, but he remembered his mother's advice. Stay calm, be respectful, but know your rights. "They're just standard headphones," he said evenly, pulling them out to show her. "Is there a problem?" Heather's eyes narrowed. "We need to ensure all passengers are following proper protocols for safety." "I understand," Marcus said, though no other passenger retrieving items from their bags had been questioned. The businessman next to Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "The kid's just getting headphones," he muttered almost to himself. Heather ignored him, keeping her attention fixed on Marcus. "I'll be keeping an eye on this row," she said before walking away. Marcus put on his headphones but didn't play any music. His heart was beating faster than normal and a familiar knot of tension had formed in his stomach. He'd experienced this before, in stores where he was followed by security, in upscale neighborhoods where residents eyed him suspiciously as he walked to friends' houses. His mother called it the tax they paid simply for existing in certain spaces. He glanced at his watch. 1 more hour until landing, 1 hour until he would see his mother, the person who always made him feel safe, valued, and understood. He tried to return to his book, but the words blurred before him. Instead, he closed his eyes, pretending to nap while mentally rehearsing the speech he would give at his school's debate tournament next month. The topic was equal protection under law, and Marcus had been researching it extensively. Little did he know how personal that topic was about to become. Marcus opened his eyes as the plane hit a patch of turbulence. He had managed to doze off despite his unease. The captain's voice came over the intercom, asking passengers to return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. The flight to Washington, D.C. had about 40 minutes remaining. The businessman next to Marcus had fallen asleep, his head tilted back against the headrest, mouth slightly open. Across the aisle, the older white couple was flipping through a travel magazine together, pointing at pictures of monuments they planned to visit. Marcus's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since early morning, rushing to make his flight. He noticed Heather and another flight attendant, a younger woman named Amy according to her name tag, collecting trash from the earlier beverage service. When Amy reached his row, she offered him a friendly smile. "Can I take that for you?" she asked, gesturing to his empty water cup. "Yes, thank you," Marcus replied, handing it to her. "Is there any chance I could get a snack? I missed breakfast this morning." "Of course," Amy said. "We have cookies or pretzels in first class. Which would you prefer?" Before Marcus could answer, Heather appeared beside Amy. "I'll handle this row," she said firmly. Amy looked surprised but nodded and moved on to the next passengers. Heather turned to Marcus, her smile gone. "What seems to be the problem?" "No problem," Marcus said calmly. I just asked if I could have a snack. Snack service is over, Heather stated, though Marcus had seen her give cookies to a passenger just 2 rows ahead less than 5 minutes ago. I understand, Marcus said, not wanting to create a scene. Thank you anyway. Heather lingered a moment longer as if expecting him to argue. When he didn't, she moved on, but not before giving him another suspicious glance. The businessman beside Marcus stirred and opened his eyes. He had apparently overheard the exchange. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a granola bar. Here, kid, he said, offering it to Marcus. Airline food isn't great anyway. Thank you, sir, Marcus said, genuinely appreciative of the small kindness. Don't mention it, the man replied. I'm Steve, by the way. Heading to DC for business? Or pleasure? Pleasure, Marcus answered. Visiting my mom. She moved there recently for work. Steve nodded. Nice city, lots of history. First time visiting? Second time, Marcus explained. I went for her job ceremony, but this is my first time staying for more than a day. Their conversation was interrupted by Heather, who had returned and was now standing in the aisle watching them with narrowed eyes. Is everything all right here? She asked, her question seemingly directed at Steve rather than Marcus. Just fine, Steve replied, his tone slightly cooler than before. Just making conversation with my roommate here. Heather nodded but didn't move away immediately. Just making sure, she said, her eyes flicking to Marcus and then back to Steve. Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Once Heather finally walked away, he pulled it out to check. It was a text from his mother. Just arrived at the airport. Can't wait to see you. Love you. A warm feeling spread through his chest. He quickly texted back. Landing soon. Love you too. As he was putting his phone away, Heather reappeared. What are you doing? She demanded. Just checking a text from my mom, Marcus explained. She's waiting at the airport. All electronic devices should be in airplane mode during flight, Heather said sharply. It is in airplane mode, Marcus explained. It stores messages to deliver when I land. I just wanted to see if she had sent anything. Let me see, Heather insisted, holding out her hand. Marcus hesitated. His phone contained personal information, photos, and messages. He glanced around and noticed several other passengers openly using their phones. I don't think I'm required to hand over my personal property, he said politely but firmly. But I'm happy to put it away for the rest of the flight. Heather's face hardened. That sounds like non-compliance with crew member instructions, which is a federal offense. Steve shifted in his seat. Come on, that's a bit much. The kid was just checking a message from his mom. Sir, please stay out of this. Heather snapped. This is a security matter. By now, several nearby passengers were watching. An older woman across the aisle had her phone out and appeared to be recording the interaction. Marcus noticed this and felt both embarrassed and relieved. Embarrassed to be the center of attention, but relieved that whatever happened next would be documented. I apologize if I've broken any rules, Marcus said calmly. I've put my phone away now. Heather leaned closer. This attitude won't help you, she said, quietly. I've dealt with troublemakers before. The word stung. Marcus had never been called a troublemaker in his life. He was an honor student, debate team captain, and volunteer at the local library's reading program for younger kids. His mother had raised him to be respectful and dignified, especially in difficult situations. He took a deep breath. Ma'am, I don't want any trouble, he said. I just want to reach Washington safely and meet my mother. Heather straightened up, her expression unchanged. We'll see about that, she said, before walking toward the front of the plane. Steve let out a low whistle. That was something, he said. You handled it well, though. Better than I would have at your age. Marcus gave a small smile. Thanks. My mom always says to stay calm and speak clearly when things get tense. Smart woman, your mom, Steve commented. What does she do in D.C.? Marcus hesitated. His mother had taught him to be careful about sharing too much personal information with strangers, even seemingly friendly ones. She works for the government, he said simply. Steve nodded, not pressing further. Government town, DC. Everyone either works for the government or works with people who work for the government. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, announcing their descent into Reagan National Airport. Marcus looked out the window as the plane lowered through the clouds. The Potomac River came into view, along with the distinctive shapes of the Washington Monument and the Capitol Dome in the distance. Under different circumstances, the sight would have filled Marcus with excitement. Now, it brought a mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief that the uncomfortable flight was almost over. Anxiety about what Heather might do next. As the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Marcus noticed Heather speaking urgently to the lead flight attendant, gesturing in his direction several times. The lead attendant, an older man with gray hair, glanced toward Marcus with a frown. When the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers began to stand, Marcus reached for his backpack. Heather immediately appeared. "Leave your belongings," she instructed. "You'll need to wait." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "May I ask why?" "Security concern," Heather replied tersely. "Airport police will escort you off the aircraft." The surrounding passengers exchanged glances. The woman who had been recording earlier had her phone out again. "What security concern?" Steve asked, standing up beside Marcus. "He's just a kid who's been sitting here quietly the whole flight." Heather ignored him, addressing Marcus directly. "Remain in your seat until all other passengers have deplaned." Marcus nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. He thought of his mother waiting at the arrival area, checking her watch, wondering why he hadn't appeared yet. He wished he could text her, but he knew reaching for his phone now would only make things worse. As the cabin emptied, several passengers gave Marcus sympathetic looks. One older black woman paused beside his row. "You all right, honey?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus answered, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Good," she said. "Stay strong. I've got this all on video, just in case." Marcus thanked her as she moved on. Through the windows, he could see two uniformed airport police officers waiting in the jetway. His heart sank, but he straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, he would face it with the dignity his mother had taught him. The plane was nearly empty now. Only Marcus, the flight crew, and Steve remained on board. Steve had refused to leave despite Heather's increasingly frustrated requests. "I'm not comfortable leaving the young man alone in this situation," Steve had said firmly. "I'll wait." Heather had finally given up trying to remove him, instead disappearing to the front of the plane where she was speaking with the two airport police officers who had boarded. Marcus could see them through the gap between the seats but couldn't hear what they were saying. "You doing okay?" Steve asked quietly. Marcus nodded, though his hands were slightly shaking. He clasped them together in his lap to steady them. "Yes, sir. Thank you for staying." "No problem," Steve replied. "This whole thing is ridiculous. I travel every week for business and I've never seen anything like this." One of the police officers, a tall man with broad shoulders and a serious expression, walked down the aisle toward them. His badge read, Officer Kevin Daniels. The second, officer, shorter with a mustache, remained at the front of the plane with Heather. "Mr. Johnson?" Officer Daniels asked, stopping beside Marcus's seat. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I need you to come with me, please," the officer said. "Bring your belongings." Marcus stood and collected his backpack. Steve rose as well. "Officer, I was sitting next to this young man the entire flight," Steve said. "Whatever complaint was made about him is completely unfounded." Officer Daniels gave Steve a measured look. "Sir, we're just following procedure based on the flight crew's report. We need to ask him some questions." "Then I'd like to give a statement." "As a witness," Steve insisted. "You can do that after we complete our initial assessment," Officer Daniels replied. "Right now, I need to speak with Mr. Johnson alone." Marcus appreciated Steve's support but didn't want to cause more trouble. "It's okay," he told Steve. "I'll be fine. Thank you for everything." Steve looked reluctant but nodded. "I'll wait in the terminal," he promised, "and I'll make sure those videos get to you." Marcus followed Officer Daniels up the aisle. Heather watched him pass with a satisfied expression. The lead flight attendant looked more uncertain, glancing between Heather and Marcus with a furrowed brow. In the jetway, the second officer introduced himself as Officer Garcia. "We're going to move to a private area to talk," he explained, his tone more gentle than his partner's. They walked through the terminal, Marcus between the two officers. People stared as they passed. Some pulled out their phones to record. Marcus kept his eyes forward, his back straight, just as his mother had taught him. "Head high, shoulders back," she always said. "Never let them see you bend." They entered. A small room off the main terminal marked airport security. Inside was a table with 4 chairs. The room was plain with white walls and no windows. "Have a seat," Officer Daniels said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Marcus sat down, placing his backpack carefully on the floor beside him. The officers took seats across from him. "Do you know why we're talking to you today?" Officer Daniels asked. "No, sir," Marcus answered truthfully. "The flight attendant said there was a security concern, but I don't know what that means." Officer Garcia opened a notebook. "According to the report from the flight attendant, you were behaving suspiciously throughout the flight, refused to comply with crew instructions, and made threatening movements." Marcus blinked in surprise. "That's not true, sir. I was just sitting in my seat reading my book and checking a text from my mother. The flight attendant says you refused to show her what you were doing on your phone," Officer Daniels continued. "I explained that I was just checking a message from my mom," Marcus said. "I offered to put my phone away, but I didn't think I needed to hand over my personal property. She also reported that you were reaching suspiciously into your bag multiple times," Officer Garcia added. "I was getting my headphones," Marcus explained calmly. "And later I put my book away. Nothing suspicious." Officer Daniels leaned forward. "Son, it's best to just be honest with us. Why were you really on this flight?" The question confused Marcus. "To visit my mother in D.C. She moved here recently for work." "And what's in the backpack?" Officer Daniels asked, eyeing it. "My laptop, a book, and a gift for my mom," Marcus answered. "You're welcome to look." Officer Garcia picked up the backpack and began searching through it. He pulled out the items Marcus had mentioned: a laptop, a book about FBI careers, and a small wrapped package. "What's this?" Officer Garcia asked, holding up the wrapped gift. "It's a framed photo of my mom and me from my school award ceremony," Marcus explained. "You can open it if you need to." Officer Garcia carefully unwrapped the package, revealing exactly what Marcus had described: a simple silver frame containing a photo of Marcus in a suit, standing next to a striking black woman in formal attire, both smiling proudly. Something in Officer Garcia's expression changed as he looked at the photo. He glanced at Marcus, then back at the photo, then at his partner. "Kevin," he said quietly. But Officer Daniels was focused on his questioning. "Why? Were you in first class?" Officer Daniels asked. "That's an expensive ticket for a teenager." "I saved up from my part-time job," Marcus explained. "I wanted to surprise my mom with the visit, and she always flies first class for work, so I thought it would be nice." "Kevin," Officer Garcia tried. Again, more urgently this time. "And what does your mother do that she flies first class for work?" Officer Daniels continued, ignoring his partner. Before Marcus could answer, Officer Garcia placed the photo on the table, facing Officer Daniels. "You need to look at this," he said firmly. Officer Daniels glanced down at the photo, then back up at Marcus. "What am I looking at?" "The woman in the photo," Officer Garcia said. "Look closely." Officer Daniels studied the image more carefully. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. At that moment, Marcus's phone rang. He looked at the officers questioningly. "You can answer it," Officer Garcia said. Marcus pulled out his phone. "It's my mom," he said, then accepted the call. "Hi, Mom." "Marcus, where are you?" Olivia Johnson's voice came through clearly, concern evident in her tone. "I've been waiting at the gate for 20 minutes. I'm in a security room with 2 airport police officers, Marcus explained calmly. There was an issue on the flight. There was a brief silence on the other end. When Olivia spoke again, her voice had changed. It was cooler, more controlled. "Put one of the officers on the phone, please," she said. Marcus held out the phone to Officer Daniels. "My mother would like to speak with you." Officer Daniels took the phone with a hint of reluctance. "This is Officer Kevin Daniels, Reagan National Airport Police." Marcus couldn't hear what his mother said, but he watched as Officer Daniels' expression shifted from professional detachment to growing concern. "Yes, ma'am," Officer Daniels said. "I understand. Room 342 in Terminal B. Yes, ma'am." He handed the phone back to Marcus, his demeanor notably changed. "Your mother's on her way," he said. "She should be here in about 5 minutes." Marcus nodded and put his phone away. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. Officer Garcia was carefully rewrapping the photo frame and returning it to Marcus's backpack. Officer Daniels was reviewing his notes, frowning slightly. "Can you tell me what the flight attendant specifically reported?" Marcus asked. Officer Daniels hesitated before answering. "She claimed you were acting aggressively, potentially hiding something dangerous, and that you refused direct safety instructions." "None of that is true," Marcus said. "There are multiple passengers who recorded what happened. One of them, Steve, was sitting right next to me the whole flight." "We'll look into that," Officer Garcia assured him. "We'll need statements from other passengers." They sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Marcus noticed Officer Daniels repeatedly checking his watch and glancing at the door. Officer Garcia had moved his chair slightly back from the table, creating more space. Finally, a sharp knock came at the door. Officer Garcia stood quickly to open it. In the doorway stood Olivia Johnson. She wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, her natural hair styled in a neat updo. Her posture was straight, her gaze intense and focused. Around her neck hung a government ID badge with the FBI seal clearly visible. "I'd like to know," she said in a voice that filled the small room, despite its measured tone, "why my son is being detained." The small security room fell silent. Olivia Johnson stood in the doorway, her presence commanding the space instantly. The 2 officers straightened their postures almost automatically. Special Agent in Charge, Olivia Johnson, FBI, Washington Field. "Office," she said, her voice calm but firm as she stepped inside. She looked at Marcus first, her eyes quickly scanning him for any signs of distress. "Are you okay?" she asked him. "I'm fine, Mom," Marcus assured her, relief evident in his voice. Olivia nodded once, then turned her attention to the officers. Officer Daniels had risen to his feet, his expression a mixture of surprise and sudden understanding. "Ma'am," he began, "we were just following protocol based on a report from the flight crew." "I'd like to see that report," Olivia interrupted. "And I'd like an explanation of what protocol involves detaining a minor without parental notification or legal representation." Officer Garcia, who had remained standing by the door, cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson." "Special Agent in Charge." "Johnson," she corrected him. "Special Agent in Charge Johnson," Officer Garcia amended. "We were told by a flight attendant that your son was behaving suspiciously and refused to comply with safety instructions. We are required to investigate such reports." Olivia's expression remained composed, but her eyes flashed. "And what suspicious behavior did my son exhibit exactly?" Officer Daniels glanced down at his notes. "According to the flight attendant, he was, reaching into his bag multiple times, refused to show her what he was doing on his phone, and had what she described as an attitude problem." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Reaching into his bag? You mean like every passenger does on every flight? And refusing to surrender his private property without cause is now considered an attitude problem?" "Mom," Marcus said quietly, "there are videos. Other passengers were recording what happened." Olivia looked at her son, then back at the officers. "I want to see those videos, and I want to speak with this flight attendant." "That would be Heather Mills," Officer Garcia supplied. "She should still be at the gate completing her report." "Good," Olivia said. "Officer Daniels, please go and ask Ms. Mills to join us." Officer Garcia, I'd like you to collect the contact information of any passengers who witnessed or recorded the incident. The officers exchanged glances. Ma'am, Officer Daniels began hesitantly, with all due respect, you don't have jurisdiction over airport police procedures. Olivia's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted slightly. You're right, Officer Daniels, I don't. But I do have jurisdiction over federal civil rights violations, which this is rapidly beginning to resemble. Now you can either cooperate with my requests or I can make a call to your supervisor, followed by calls to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and the Transportation Security Administration's Office of Civil Rights. Your choice. Officer Daniels hesitated only a moment longer before nodding. I'll get Ms. Mills, he said, then left the room. Officer Garcia looked uncomfortable, but remained professional. I'll check for witnesses, he said, following his partner. Out. When the door closed behind them, Olivia's formal demeanor softened immediately. She moved to Marcus and embraced him tightly. I'm so sorry this happened, she said, her voice now filled with the warmth she reserved for her son. It's okay, Mom, Marcus said, returning her hug. I'm used to it. Olivia pulled back to look at him, her hands on his shoulders. It's not okay, she said firmly, and you shouldn't have to be used to it. Did they touch you? Search you? Say anything inappropriate? No, Marcus assured her. They just asked questions. The one with the mustache, Officer Garcia, seemed to recognize you from the photo I brought. Olivia nodded. I've given several presentations to the airport police since taking over the field office. They should know who I am. She looked around the room with a critical eye. They had no right to detain you like this. The flight attendant, Heather, she was watching me the whole flight, Marcus explained. Checking my seatbelt, asking for my boarding pass twice, questioning me about getting my headphones from my bag. When I checked your text message, she demanded to see my phone. Olivia's jaw tightened. And that's when you refused? Yes, Marcus confirmed. I remembered what you taught me about knowing my rights. I told her I'd put it away. But I didn't. Have to hand it over. A small, proud smile crossed Olivia's face. Good. You did exactly right. She squeezed his shoulder. I'm sorry I wasn't there. A businessman named Steve stuck up for me, Marcus told her. He said he'd wait in the terminal to give a statement. We'll find him, Olivia promised. We'll get statements from everyone who saw what happened. The door opened and Officer Daniels returned with Heather Mills. The flight attendant entered the room with confident steps, but her expression changed the moment she saw Olivia. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by uncertainty. Ms. Mills, Olivia said, turning to face her. I'm Special Agent in Charge Olivia Johnson. I understand you filed a security complaint against my son. Heather's confidence visibly faltered. Your son? Yes, Olivia confirmed. Marcus Johnson, the young man you accused of suspicious behavior and had removed from your flight by police. Heather glanced between Olivia and Marcus, the family resemblance now obvious to her. I was simply following airline security protocols, she said, her voice less certain than before. Please explain these protocols to me, Olivia requested, her tone deceptively mild. Specifically, I'd like to know which protocol requires singling out a black teenager for normal passenger behaviors. I didn't single him out, Heather protested. He was acting suspiciously. How? Olivia pressed. Be specific. Heather shifted her weight from one foot to the other. He kept reaching into his bag. To get his headphones, Marcus said quietly. And he refused to show me what he was doing on his phone, Heather continued. You mean he exercised his Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizure, Olivia corrected. What else? Heather's lips pressed into a thin line. He had an attitude. An attitude, Olivia repeated. Could you describe this attitude in objective terms? Did he raise his voice, use profanity, make threats? No, but did he comply with all legitimate safety instructions? Technically, yes, but Ms. Mills, Olivia interrupted. I've been a federal agent for 17 years. I know the difference between a security threat and racial profiling. What happened on that flight was the latter. The door opened again, and Officer Garcia returned with Steve, the businessman who had sat next to Marcus. I found one of the witnesses, Officer Garcia announced. This gentleman was seated next to Mr. Johnson and says he observed the entire interaction. Steve stepped forward, extending his hand to Olivia. Steve Brennan, ma'am. I was sitting in 3B next to your son. I have to say he handled himself with remarkable poise throughout this entire situation. Thank you for supporting my son, Olivia said, shaking his hand. I'd like to hear what you observed. Everything the young man has likely told you is accurate, Steve said. The flight attendant treated him differently from the moment we boarded, checked his seatbelt, asked for his boarding pass twice, questioned him when he reached for his headphones, when he checked a text message, which I saw was from you. She demanded to see his phone. He politely declined and offered to put it away instead, which he did immediately. Officer Daniels was taking notes now, his expression increasingly uncomfortable. There's more, Steve continued. She denied him a snack that she gave to other passengers, and she called over another officer when he asked a different flight attendant for one. I've been flying this airline weekly for 5 years, and I've never seen behavior like this from their staff. Do you have any recording of these interactions? Olivia asked. Not personally, Steve replied, but the woman across the aisle, Paula, I think her name was, she recorded most of it, and there were at least 3 other passengers doing the same. I heard them talking about posting it online as we deplaned. Officer Garcia cleared his throat. I've collected contact information from 6 passengers who witnessed the incidents. 3 have video recordings they're willing to share. Heather's face had gone pale. This is being blown completely out of proportion, she protested. I was just doing my job. No, Ms. Mills, Olivia said firmly. You were abusing your position of authority to harass a young man based on his race, and now you're going to face the consequences of that choice. She turned to Officer Daniels. I want a full incident report, copies of all witness statements, and all video evidence secured before it ends up on social media. Officer Garcia, please escort Ms. Mills to your supervisor's office. I'll be speaking with the airline management and TSA officials immediately. The officers nodded, the chain of command now clear to everyone in the room. Heather looked from Olivia to the officers, seemingly expecting them to defend her. When they didn't, her expression hardened. This isn't fair. You're only taking his side because he's your son. No, Ms. Mills, Olivia replied calmly. They're taking his side because the evidence supports his account. The fact that he's my son just means you picked the wrong person to discriminate against today. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at Reagan National Airport. Marcus sat in the back row of a large conference room at the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with airline staff, airport security personnel, police officers, and civil rights advocates. At the front, standing beside a podium, was his mother. Olivia Johnson looked every bit the leader she was in her dark suit and simple pearl earrings. Her voice carried through the room without her having to raise it. What happened to my son is not unique, she was saying. It happens every day to people who don't have FBI badges or the power to demand accountability. That's why we're here today. Marcus felt a mix of pride and unease as he watched his mother. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind. Videos of his detention had indeed gone viral, appearing on news shows and social media platforms across the country. Hashtags like Now Flying While Black and Heather, the flight attendant, had trended for days. The airline had issued a public apology within hours of the incident, announcing that Heather Mills had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Officer Daniels had also faced consequences. After a review of his conduct, he had been assigned to additional training and community service. Officer Garcia, who had been more reasonable throughout the ordeal, had actually reached out to Olivia to offer his assistance with today's training program. Our goal today is not to point fingers or assign blame, Olivia continued. Our goal is to ensure this doesn't happen again. We'll be reviewing specific strategies to recognize and overcome implicit bias in transportation security. Marcus shifted in his seat, adjusting his tie. His mother had asked if he would be willing to speak briefly about his experience. Though public speaking usually didn't bother him, he was on the debate team after all. This felt different, more personal, more important. The door at the back of the room opened quietly, and Steve Brennan, the businessman who had sat next to Marcus on the flight, slipped in. He spotted Marcus and gave him a small wave before taking a seat nearby. They had kept in touch since the incident. Steve had given statements to both the airline and the media, and had even written a passionate op-ed for the Washington Post about what he had witnessed. Olivia was now introducing a panel of experts who would be leading breakout sessions later in the day. Marcus recognized Paula Washington, the woman who had recorded the most comprehensive video of the incident. She had turned out to be a civil rights attorney who specialized in transportation discrimination cases. Next to her sat Dr. Eric Freeman, a psychologist who researched implicit bias, and Sam Rivera, a former TSA supervisor, who now trained security personnel on equitable screening practices. As the panel began their presentation, Marcus thought back to the days immediately following the incident. His weekend visit with his mother had turned into something very different from what he had planned. Instead of museum visits and his favorite DC restaurants, there had been meetings with airline executives, interviews with internal investigators, and a seemingly endless stream of phone calls. The airline's CEO had personally called to apologize, promising immediate changes to their training programs. Heather Mills had eventually been fired after the investigation confirmed a pattern of discriminatory behavior that extended beyond just the incident with Marcus. Several other passengers had come forward with similar stories once the news broke. Marcus had been surprised by the public reaction. He had received hundreds of supportive messages from strangers who had experienced similar treatment. Several civil rights organizations had reached out, asking if he would be willing to share his story as part of their educational campaigns. A few people had even sent college scholarship offers. His friends back in Chicago had been supportive, but also a little overwhelmed by the attention. His debate coach had used the incident as a teaching moment, integrating discussions about civil rights and transportation into their preparation for the national competition. The panel discussion concluded, and Olivia returned to the podium. "Now, I'd like to introduce someone with a unique perspective on these issues," she said, her voice softening slightly. "My son, Marcus Johnson, who experienced firsthand what happens when bias influences security decisions." Marcus took a deep breath and walked to the front of the room. As he passed her, his mother gave his arm a gentle squeeze of encouragement. He stood at the podium and looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some uncomfortable, all attentive. "Thank you for being here today," he began, his voice steadier than he had expected. 3 weeks ago, I was just a kid excited to visit his mom. I wasn't thinking about becoming an example in a training session. I wasn't thinking about viral videos or news interviews. I was just thinking about how much I missed my mother and how great it would be to spend the weekend with her." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "What happened on that flight wasn't new to me. It wasn't even the worst example of profiling I've experienced, but it was the one that got attention because of who my mother is." Marcus glanced at Olivia, who gave him an encouraging nod. "I think about all the people who go through this every day without an FBI agent for a parent. People who don't get apologies from CEOs or training sessions dedicated to their experience. People who are just told to move on, to get over it, to accept that this is just how things are." The room was completely silent now. "I'm 17, Marcus continued. "I shouldn't have to have special training from my mother on how to survive, being detained by police for existing while black. No teenager should, but here we are." He looked directly at the airline staff section of the audience. "I don't want Heather Mills to lose her career forever. I want her to learn and grow and do better. I want everyone in this room to do better. Not because you're afraid of going viral or getting sued, but because it's the right thing to do." Marcus stepped back from the podium, and the room erupted in applause. His mother embraced him briefly before addressing the audience again. "We'll now break into our workshop sessions," she announced. "Group A will start with Dr. Freeman on recognizing implicit bias, Group B with Ms. Washington on legal implications of discriminatory practices, and Group C with Mr. Rivera on equitable security protocols." As people began moving toward their assigned sessions, Steve approached Marcus. That was really something, he said, extending his hand. You've got a future in public speaking, that's for sure. Marcus shook his hand. Thanks for coming today, and for everything you did on the flight. Steve shook his head. I didn't do enough. I should have spoken up sooner, more forcefully. You did more than most people would, Marcus assured him. Olivia joined them, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder. The airline representatives want to speak with you if you're comfortable with that. Marcus nodded. I'm ready. 3 airline executives approached, led by their chief of customer experience. Mr. Johnson, the woman said, your words were powerful and honest. We'd like to discuss the possibility of you joining our advisory council on passenger rights and dignity. We're establishing it as part of our commitment to prevent incidents, like yours, from happening again. Marcus looked at his mother, who gave him a small nod indicating it was his decision to make. I'd be interested in learning more, he said carefully, but I'd want to make sure it's not just for show. Real changes need to happen. Absolutely, the executive agreed. We can set up a proper meeting to discuss the details. We're serious about making meaningful improvements. As they exchanged contact information, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The incident had been painful, frightening, and unfair. But perhaps some good could come from it after all. Later that evening, as Marcus and Olivia finally got their quiet dinner together at his favorite DC restaurant, she raised her water glass in a toast. To my brave, articulate, and principled son, she said, her eyes shining with pride, who just might change the world. Marcus smiled and clinked his glass against hers. I learned from the best, he replied. Outside the restaurant window, the lights of the nation's capital glowed in the early evening darkness. Tomorrow, Marcus would return to Chicago to finish his junior year. He would go back to being just another student, at least within the walls of his school. But he knew something fundamental had shifted. His voice had been heard, his experience had mattered, and maybe, just maybe, the next black teenager on a flight would be treated with the dignity and respect that everyone deserved.